You're on the Friday Riff with Dermot Hussey. The sound of 7 musicians, Island Head, led by drummer-producer Billy Messinetti, and their new album, Punky Reggae Party. Bill is like so many musicians who are inspired to pay maximum respect to Bob Marley. This group, Island Head Musicians, is it a working band or is it just a group of guys that you assembled for this project?
Well, at first, it was a group that I assembled for this project to see my vision. I had this vision. When I first went to Jamaica, I promised myself that someday, and that was 24 years ago, by the way, I promised myself someday I was going to record music of Bob Marley. I don't know why. I don't know. I didn't know when. But then when I decided to do it, I decided I wanted to put together a band of very, very special musicians. My favorite musicians that I knew of and found, and almost like a dream band. And it was to fulfill this vision that I had of doing Bob Marley's music in a way that really no one else had ever done as far as I could tell and as far as I knew of. And so I had this vision of taking some of the background vocals and turning them into horn parts and taking some of the lead vocals and making them guitar parts. And just I had this vision in my head, and it was like a crazy vision. And I said, I got to find guys that will see this and hear this in their head before we do this. And what was remarkable about the whole thing is that the reaction from the musicians, when I started to explain to them what my idea was, they immediately, like, their brains lit up, and they were like, I'm in. All right, let's do this. And so now the reaction from the musicians is, if I could go out in front of an audience and play this music, it would really make me happy. We all, as musicians, we all do gigs that we do for money, and then we have gigs that we do for the love of it. This is one of those gigs.
That idea of approaching a body of his music through the backup vocals and then, apportioning guitar parts and all that, that's actually a very, very creative idea. Was there anything specific that inspired that?
The thing that inspired me to do that was I knew I didn't want to make a vocal record. I felt that I wanted to do something different with the music. I didn't want it to be another Bob Marley tribute record. I wanted to pay respect to the music and respect to the musicians who created it. As a drummer, when you listen to, this is what's really interesting. Like, when I was a kid, I was in love with Stevie Wonder's music. One of the things that really hit home for me was I could sit by myself with a set of headphones and I would listen to his albums over and over and over and over. And every time I listened, I heard something that I didn't hear before. And I said, you know what? There's something special about a record like that. And I even used that as a reference to the musicians. And I said, I want to create a record that everything is not apparent on first listen. That each time you listen to it, you're going to hear something else, and you're going to hear something else. And I found that same Marley's music. When you listen to even a song as simple as One Love, which everybody on the planet knows, it sounds like a very simple song with a very simple groove. Well, guess what? It's not. Mm-hmm. When you listen to it and you break it down and you hear what the drummer's doing, I mean, Carlton Barrett, I mean, he was a brilliant drummer.
Yes.
Genius drummer. Absolutely. I listen and study his drumming, and it's just, I mean, the grooves are so deep. You listen to a Marley record, and there's a drummer, and there's at least one percussionist, maybe two. There's a bass player. There's at least two, possibly three guitar players. There's a clavinet. There's an organ, or maybe there's a piano, but there's always two keyboard parts. And sometimes he has horns, sometimes he doesn't. He mostly has background vocals, you know, like when the I3s came along and they had the three-part female vocals, and before them, you know, when Peter and Bunny did the background vocals, there was always background vocals. So you have all those layers of things going on, but it sounds simple.
The choice of tunes that you decided to do?
My first thought was the Legend album. Probably it's in everyone's record collection by now. It's still at the top of the chart. I would start with some of that music. You know, one of the guys who really helped me to in the song choices was Andy Basford, and Andy, as you know, is pretty much a legendary guitar player in the reggae world. He's played with Toots and, you know, a million other people.
That's right, yeah.
And he said those songs are like the workhorse songs. We should have a couple of those, but really, let's look deeper than that. So I started to explore things and just listen to a bunch of different records that I had, and I started to look for something different. You know, I Shot the Sheriff, Get Up, Stand Up, those were pretty obvious choices for me because they really hit home. But one of the songs that I always loved, I thought the groove was the deepest, funkiest groove I ever heard in my life, which was Burnin' and Lootin'. It's so slow and it's so hypnotic. And I said, how could I ever do this justice? And Andy said to me, you know, sometimes the ones that are the biggest challenges come out to be the best. So I said, you know what, I'm going to keep working on it. So I worked on different grooves until I came up with something that made that work. And one that was really interesting which was my last choice, was kind of an add-on, was So Much Trouble in the World. And So Much Trouble in the World I had forgotten about, and I went to, when I was first doing the arrangements with Don Harris, the trumpet player, I was actually driving home from his house, and I had your program on. I was listening to the joint, and I'm listening, and right before I came home, right before I got to my house, So Much Trouble in the World came on, and I just lit up, and I started singing the song, and I said, I have to record this song. And at the time, Val Douglas from the Scatolites was supposed to be playing bass on this record, and as it turned out, with touring schedules, it didn't work out. But I sent an email to Val, and I said, hey, Val, what would you think of recording So Much Trouble in the World? And he said, I played bass on that record. And when he said that, I was like, okay, it's meant to be. I'm recording this song. And sure enough, that's the first song that people started to play on the radio.
You've been blessed, you know.
I have.
Yeah, because it's a love for the music, it's an understanding of the music, and also an understanding based on a simpatico musician.
Absolutely. You know, as a musician, the only people I ever hung around with were musicians because I felt I couldn't relate to civilians, so to speak, you know. And so the only friends I had were musicians. And, you know, most of my life, it's kind of been that way. But as you get older and you have family and stuff, you find kindred spirits and all kinds of people.
This project, Island Head, are you going to remain as a group and tour behind the album? And what kind of responses have you had so far?
We have not done our first gig yet. Part of the reason is because of logistics of Mikey being in Jamaica. If I could give a shout out to Mikey Mao Chung in Jamaica.
And tell him, get over here.
Yeah, tell him, get over here, start rehearsing with us.
Okay.
But Mikey's in Jamaica. David Frank is in Los Angeles. And the rest of us are in New York. And Don, my trumpet player, just got off the road. He was out with Nile Rodgers and Chic in Japan. So we're going to start rehearsing shortly, and we're going to do a couple of warm-up gigs in some clubs in New York City. And we're hoping to tour later on this year.
Great. In fact, I keep prefacing Tim Capello by being, you know, this muscular guy that you see on what her name's videos. Tina Turner's videos.
Yeah, he's in all Tina Turner's videos. He's a famous guy, Timmy.
Okay, and he's into the music as well.
Absolutely. Timmy was the first guy that I went to for this project because Timmy and I had done a lot of gigs together. Timmy is like a reggae connoisseur. Timmy knows all the old stuff from back in the Scatolite days and through that early time of the 60s and the 70s and stuff. He's like a reggae historian. He knows all of that stuff. And we used to have conversations about reggae all the time. When I thought to do this project, he was the very first guy that I went to and said, hey, I got this idea. And Timmy said to me, Billy, I'm in. You don't even have to pay me.
To come full circle, Bill, reggae is at a situation now where the music is widely popular on a global level, but it's the classic music that people seem to reach out to now, because there's been a decline largely in terms of the contemporary reggae music. What do you think, if you have an opinion, of what's happening to reggae now? Why is there this kind of downturn? Is it a qualitative question, or is it that the music in some senses hasn't kept abreast, or what? How do you see it?
It's a kind of a question that really, I think, could relate to all kinds of music. When kids listen to new music, it's kind of shoved down their throat. They like it because they hear it all the time. But when the people who love the music for what it is and start to look at the history of the music and start to reach back, then they start to find out where it came from, and you find that the original people who did it, they are the roots, they're the foundation of where this music came from. And I think that people like to gravitate to that. Look, let's face it, the young kids today, they need a way, just like back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a resurgence of reggae then, and at least in the States and Europe, and it was caused by people from bands like The Police or Elvis Costello. Those people knew Bob Marley, and they knew all the early reggae artists, Jimmy Cliff and Toots and all those guys. They knew the music, they knew the grooves, and they said, hey, you know what, there's something about this that's special, and let's do it our way. And that was like a door opener. It was an introduction for people who heard those reggae grooves and said, hey, this music is really cool. Where did this come from? And then you start to look back. You know, when I was a teenager, I was introduced to John McLaughlin and the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And when I heard him and drummer Billy Cobham completely knocked my socks off, blew the door open for my exploration into jazz. I think that these contemporary artists are good for, you know, the young people to hear the reggae stuff, but the fact that people like you are around that play the rootsy stuff as well as the new stuff, you know, then people can make the connection. So the thing about reggae is it's a music of people of the world. People from all over the world appreciate this music. Why do they appreciate it? Well, I'll tell you why I think they appreciate it, because everyone has problems. Everyone has trouble. The music that Bob Marley wrote about was about oppression of people, was about trying to get people to be optimistic about their problems and make them feel good. Interesting about Marley's music is that the words are, if you listen to the words, they could be depressing, but you listen to the music, and the music makes you happy and want to move and dance. So it's this whole thing going on where he's talking about the problems, but you're smiling.
Forget your troubles and dance.